We are doing healing through the gospel, the healing power of the gospel, rather.
Yes.
Um, and we're looking forward to your message. So, yes, you can go forward. Thank you.
I can share my PowerPoint. See, I forgot how this works, but I will try.
So, share down the green button on the bottom.
Yeah, see if it works. Can you see something?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
So, Carmen asked if I would do a small presentation to help us understand better the health message, or the true health message, as he said. And I I call the presentation the healing power of the gospel, because I think we have a tendency in the church, at least, to separate the health message from the gospel as if those are two different things, and we don't understand that the message is really one. And this is why I believe Ellen writes that the health message is the right arm of the gospel, or the right hand of the gospel, that opens up the door for salvation of the people. And in reality, I think it's the reason why we separate the two is because we don't really have an understanding of the human being. So the question is, of course, if we know ourselves. And I was reminded about a situation when I had just started university, and at the time I didn't have anywhere to live. So there was a nice couple from the church north of Copenhagen that took me in together with a friend of mine, and we were staying with them until we found an apartment over there. And now in the house, they had a washing machine. They let us use everything they had, and we didn't pay any rent. We also got to drive their cars and bring home young people whenever we wanted. They were very nice and hospitable. And but one weekend they were away, and we had a guest, and we made a stain on the tablecloth. And we wanted to see if we could wash it before they came home, because we didn't want them to see that we ruined the tablecloth. So we wanted to use the washing machine. And my girlfriend at the time, she that I was living with, she put soap in the washing machine, and she put the tablecloth in. And after the washing was done, we came down in the basement, and it was flooded by this foam. And so it turned out she put the soap where the fabric softener is supposed to go. And of course, I mean, afterwards, it's a little bit hilarious and you can laugh about it. But when we didn't know what was wrong, it was not too much fun. And I thought about this because we have the idea that if we use a machine, we know how it works. We know where the soap goes, we know where the clothes goes, we know where the water goes. If we have anything, with the car, we take it to the mechanic. We know the mechanic, he knows the car. There's a lot of things we know, and if we don't know it, we have a manual that we can look up how things work. But maybe many of you know the message a little bit already, the law of life, and you understand that we do not know the human being. We don't know what makes us work. We don't know what makes us not work. And we concentrate a lot on where the soap goes, on what kind of food we eat, if you make the comparison with the machine, or where the water goes, what kind of liquid you're drinking, what kind of food you're eating, how much you exercise, and all of this. And surely this is important, because if you put the wrong thing in the wrong place, you end up, overloading, like the washing machine. It will overload the system if there's too much, if there's too little, if it's the wrong thing in the wrong place. But we do not realize that what we're really missing to understand is how the human being works, or what puts him into function. Just like the machine, I mean, you can put the soap and the clothes and the water in all the right places, But if you don't know what kind of electricity to put the machine to, or if you haven't put in the plug, then nothing will happen at all. And so I think this is what we're going to look a little bit at today. Where does the plug go, or how do we understand what makes the human being going, and how do we get him to function well? So what determines our well-being? What determines when we are in conflict, or if we have joy, if we are sad, if we are in pain, or if we get sick? What determines the function or dysfunction, if we function correctly or if we get sick? Because, I mean, disease is never very pleasant. I think everyone would like to get rid of disease. So this is always, I think, the motivation for the patient that comes to the doctor. He wants to get rid of his disease because it's not pleasant. But as Christians, we also want to get rid of our dysfunctions, God willing, not just for the sake of relief of the pain, but that we should be able to function well and work efficiently as God's workers on the earth, on this planet. So the necessary knowledge that we need is, of course, the laws of nature, because we need to know what governs the universe, what makes the world go round, what makes sure that all things work as they should, because everything is guided or governed by the same law. And also we must know the human being, how he's made, how he functions by the law, and what his needs are. And so the basic law of the universe that controls everything around us, and that also is the basis of every other law, is a law that God created the whole universe to function by. And this is his law of unselfish love. And the principles of his law, the taking to give, they are to be found in the existence and function of every created thing and being, and they can be observed everywhere in nature. Wherever we go, we will find in nature that everything works by taking to give, and everything then works as a channel. And every channel is also constantly and actively sustained by the power of God. And I think this is very important to understand, that everything works by the power of God, and all things are then created to take and give, and works in an altruistic circuit. It also means, of course, that if the circuit is broken in one place, then it will affect all the other channels around. And this is why we want to restore ourselves as the channels, so that we may work very well in this circuit that God made, so that we may bring as much fruit to him as possible. And we want to understand that the attempt to live outside the law is really the root of every issue in the universe. It is not only the issue of conflict and what we tend to call sin or sinful actions or addictions or all of these things, but it is also the cause of disease. It's because it is the attempt of the impossible. It will be to go against your own function, because everything was made to function exactly according to this law. So trying to not work like that will kill you. As it is an impossibility to live outside the law, the attempt must result in self-destruction. And so the thoughts of the spirit of man is the cause of self-destruction and disease. But as we understand now that God's power is the means of function, is what we function by, God must also control the consequences on the side of effects. That means the power we take in, when it's God's power and we then misuse the power, he must control the consequences of that misuse of the power. And so we, the human spirit, is always responsible for the effect, since the action of taking God's power is ours. Everything I do is done by me. But as it is God's power that I use, God controls the kind and the extent of the effects. So he controls every disease, every depression, every discomfort that we go through, not to harm us, but to help us out and understand that we are on the wrong side of the law. And I think this is vital to understand, that when we see something coming out of us, either disease or anger or uncontrolled behavior like abuse or self-abuse or whatever it is, then we have to recognize that something in the other end of the channel is wrong. And now, of course, the temptation is for the human being with this nature that we are born with, to think that the issue is outside of ourselves. So when disease comes, we think it's a lack of healthy food, or it's a lack of beneficial circumstances or something. Sometimes we think it's inheritance, and there are some things that may come from inheritance, but I think it's a very small fraction of the suffering we go through. And we try to look outside to just adjust the outside to make sure that we get better. And I think with disease, it's always a good idea to help nature in a good direction, to do what you can to get better if you have the energy for that. But I think we also must realize, by what we observe in nature, that the cause is in the beginning, but it is never outside of the channel when it comes to the human being. That the outside cannot make us sick. Now, we can, of course, hurt the body by drinking poison or inhaling the wrong kind of air, but this will go through the whole system. You see, I work as a dentist in my job, and in dentistry, there's a very simple idea that if you eat too much sugar, you get cavities. And if you eat a lot of sugar and you don't brush your teeth, then you get cavities. Yeah. And of course, when I heard this message, the law of life, the first time, I thought to study my patients a little bit to see if things are really as I read it in the book, or if maybe things are a little bit different. And what I've come to realize is that I've seen a lot of patients that don't eat a lot of sugar and brush and floss all they know how to do. And still they have both cavities, some of them. And even I had a lady once that just, her teeth just fell out one by one. And there was not a shadow of bacteria on her teeth anymore. And of course, then you start wondering, so what is the cause of disease? If it seems like what should be the outside issue is not really the issue, or at least it is not present every time, can it then really be the cause of the issue? I had also once, or my colleague had once, a very young boy who is about to get some of his permanent teeth, and he had one tooth that came up cavitated. I mean, it had never been exposed to sugar. It had never been exposed also almost to lack of brushing. It was only in his mouth, visible very short time. And he came to the dentist, and it had almost not even gone through the gum. And we looked at the x-ray, and the tooth was completely eaten up from the inside. And I think this is questions that we have to ask ourselves. Is it really possible by law, when you look to nature, that disease comes from outside? And you can ask yourself the question, if cavities come from eating a lot of sugar, then why do we have only cavities on one tooth and not on all the other teeth? Is it? And I mean, people have funny theories. They have the idea that the patient only chews the sugar in one side, which is, I think, a very interesting idea, because I mean, the saliva goes everywhere in the mouth. So how can you prevent the sugar from going everywhere? But of course, we have to come up with ideas, because now we were brought up with a theory that teaches us how to think, and to think outside that box. is not a natural thing for us. So we then, try to fit in our ideas with what we've learned from before. But the truth is that the outside cannot make you sick. You can poison the body, you can beat him up, you can destroy him from the outside, like that. But disease is a process that starts from within. When we have cancer, a production of dysfunctional cells is not an outside thing. It's not something that can be caused by outside. It's a growth that happens from within. And I think, therefore, it's very important to understand where the human being begins, who controls the growing of the cell, who controls the way that the body develops, or the processes in the body, and what structure in the human being makes his function. Because if he does not function well, then what can you do with him, really? You can do nothing with him. I think this is very important to understand, to be able to understand the gospel at all. I heard also many of my friends in the church that likes the health message, but from the perspective of what to eat. And they have said, some of them to me, that they find it so difficult sometimes to get people from the idea of what to eat and how to treat the body and all of this, which is all correct. But then the transfer to give them the gospel is such a difficult thing. And I was wondering why they are also opposed to this message, because this message includes everything. It includes, of course, that you need to treat the body very nicely, because it's the body of God, and we want it to function as well as possible. But it includes also the understanding of why we are not able to do that, why we are not able to feed him the right thing, why we are not able to treat him the right way, and also the real cause of why we get sick, and the true solution to the sickness, which is the gospel. So I think this is the most efficient and the most wonderful message that can be given. And I think this is the message for the last time. I have recently been very, I don't know if I would say overwhelmed, but very, I mean, I'm a very young person, so it takes sometimes a little bit of time before I get aware of things, because, when you're not used to observing things. I have been more observing the last 10 years, but it, especially the last 5 years, it's become very profound to me how many sick people there are. And it starts very early. The children get sick very early. They get cancer, and they get different immune deficiencies, and all of these mental illnesses, the ADHD and the autism, and all these things that makes them makes it impossible for them to cooperate with anything. And I have so many children right now that I refer to treatment in narcosis or general anesthesia, because they are not able to cooperate at all. You may want them to have their teeth done, but if they just lie there in the chair, and you cannot get them to do anything. And even when I give them medication and they're sedated, you cannot do anything, because the spirit of the child is so broken that there is no way for him to cooperate. So I think this is the very important message to understand. We have to understand that this law of life, or the basic life of universe, is showing us that life depends on basic needs fulfilled. And of course, we have in the middle, as when we're healthy, we have all needs met. And then when we move outside and we don't meet all the basic needs, then if we stay there long enough, at least, we have dysfunction and disease. And if we continue and we don't turn around, then we have no function and death. And God made it like this, so that when we get far away from the middle of the road to one side or the other, we will feel the consequences, so that we can understand that we are on the wrong path. And since He wants to save us by all means, then sometimes the pain has to come before we realize that we are on the wrong path. And we can ask, how many needs does the human being have? We have the physical and the chemical needs, the temperature that we need to stay inside, and the oxygen we need, the food and water and all these things. And we know that when we have different reactions from the body, if we get too hot, we start sweating, automatically we know how to deal with that. We know, okay, let's cool down a little bit and go in the other direction so that we may come back to normal function and well-being. And on the other side, we have the freezing, and we can put on more clothes to get inside and keep the body warm. Now, with these things, you have a bit of space to work with. You can freeze and still work pretty efficiently. And you can be sweating and still work pretty efficiently. But you cannot be in lack of love and work efficiently. That is never a possibility. And so we see how the human being may be able to live with very little food or very little water, or even some food that are not the best food, but at least you have something to eat and you can still do your job. But if you are in lack of love, your mind will spin around itself and it will be unconcentrated, it will not be able to work efficiently, and it will not be able to perform the task in the best way. And I know it because sometimes I am not the best at falling asleep at night. I'm not the best at getting up in the morning. And so I live very often the day without breakfast. And I work all morning and I can work very efficiently even though I'm hungry. And even when you get into the work and you do the teeth and what you like to do, then you may forget that you're hungry and you don't think about not having the food. But if I am angry, or if I am in conflict with someone, or if I am sad, I will think on that while I do the feeling, and I will see how my mood is affected. And even though I might be able to still talk to the patient in a nice way, I am still not concentrated the way that I would be if I was joyful and happy. So we must know the thoughts of the human being and how those thoughts affect us, because this is how we control ourselves, really. And love can never become too much, like in the physical world. But as soon as love becomes too little and we realize it, it will result in all kinds of diseases. However, the time we stay, of course, will affect sometimes how severe the disease is. If you've stayed in the same way of thinking for a very long time, the disease may be more heavy, or at least more developed, like cancer or these autoimmune diseases or stuff like this. And if it's only stayed there for a short time, it might turn up as headaches or tonsillitis or something that's not as difficult to deal with. So the question is, of course, where does the human being begin? And here we must know that the human spirit controls the whole being through the brain. So we have the human spirit and we have the body connected to the brain, all of the organs of the body. And all of them work in a circuit. So of course, if one organ is affected, it will affect the whole being and how well we do our job. And I think we should aim to do everything perfect. I mean, we can, of course, not in the beginning do everything perfect because our sinful nature is very strong. But our aim should be that everything works exactly as it should. And so we would like perfect function for every organ and for the whole being. And since the thoughts and decisions of the spirit makes the electrical power and controls every bodily reaction, and also what we do, our actions and our thoughts, then we should know exactly how it works. We should know exactly how to bring the right thoughts to the body so that it may work well. And the only way to do that is to understand where we begin. And before we have any thought, we must have a motivation for that thought. Now, the identity, as you have seen many times before, is as Adam came into the world, the idea that I'm a child of God, which is, of course, the truth that God created us and we're dependent on Him for everything we do. And as long as we stay in this idea, or as long as Adam stayed in this idea, he had no issues with performing his task. He was never distracted. He was never lazy. He was never overlooking anything. He would never forget anything. He knew exactly what he was to do, and he had good ideas of how to do it, and he was working very efficiently. Now, when he deceived himself and unplugged himself from God and listened to the devil through his wife, he connected now to a different source. And when you are connected to another source than the source of life, then the electricity that you produce must automatically be a bad kind of electricity. Now, in reality, it is not even a possibility to connect to any other source than God. So, in reality, Adam should have just stopped living. But now God gave him a time of probation and a life with difficulties. Now, back in Adam's days, there were not so much disease yet. But as we come into the world today, since the degeneration over many years, we have a lot of diseases because we are so broken after many generations. And I think I had the idea this week that in reality, we are brought into a life of disease and conflict because this is the only way that God can help us and save us. So probation is really just a life of disease, and we tend to want to flee every symptom and get away from it all. And it should help us. The symptoms should help us to get back on the right track, but not for the purpose of being healthy for the sake of health or for the sake of feeling comfort, but for the sake of understanding or coming to the truth that I am a child of God, that everything I have is His, it's never mine, and that I might work well in this last time to give the message to those who need it. So I'm slowly in the process of learning to appreciate disease and even depression. It's not so easy, when you have very sad thoughts or you have things that worry you, all of these things. We tend to think of it as not beneficial. But in reality, it's the means of God to save us. So to count it all a blessing and to count it all a help to see where my dependency is wrong and how to get back on the right track to function correctly. It's really a great joy when we come to believe it. Now, it's just coming to believe it that can sometimes be a tricky situation to come to understand how to do that. But we will look also a little bit on that later in the presentation. I might have to speed it up a little bit because I have a few slides, but let's just see. We want to, of course, explore the identity of the human being, of his heart. And if you heard the message before, this may be a repetition, but repetition can be a good thing. As long as we believe by the deception we inherited from Adam that we are God, this is, of course, a subconscious belief. None of us here might think that we are God, but subconsciously, we all believe it. We will also believe that we're spiritually independent of a love source. And so we believe we have possessions of our own, and we believe that we can create love ourselves. And those possessions can, of course, be things, but it can also be the people around us. Usually, the people are more important to us than the things we have. Now, the truth is that we are a child of God, and spiritually we are dependent on a love source, that nothing I have around me or on this planet is my own, and we cannot create anything. But as long as we believe we can, we can also have personal loss, because anything we believe we own, it may be taken away from us, and then we will experience loss, and we will see ourselves as a victim. And we will see in a minute how that works. Also, if we believe we don't have anything, then we cannot lose anything. If nothing you have is really yours, then you will have no pain when it's taken away from you. And you will never be a victim of circumstances or of other people either. Now, how it works in the subconscious is that the human being must always move towards gain. He can never take a loss. When the human being perceives he has a loss is when he gets below the line of zero, and that affects the electricity of the body, and that is what makes us sick. So as long as we are in the deception, we will be in the risk of being sick, because as long as I believe I have possessions or that I can create love for myself, I will expect to receive something from other people. If I believe I have love, I will give love, and I will give it from me. But since I must work as a channel, because this is how I was made to work, I must expect to get something in return, because I must live from love and I must take it from somewhere. So I have the idea that I can live without a source of love, but in reality, this is an impossibility. And I try to live without that source of love, but then automatically I will seek for love subconsciously from somewhere else. It will also give me a loss whenever I cannot receive that love then. When people don't want to treat me like I want them to treat me, or if I get too little love, or if something is taken away from me, if my mother is not alive anymore, if my father is not alive anymore. All of this will cause me to think that I had a loss, and will then bring discomfort and disease, at least if the way of thinking is not changed. It will bring hurt and conflict and unhappiness. Now, on the other side, I believe I have nothing on my own and that I cannot create anything. That means I give, but I know that what I give is not mine. And so I can never have a loss, because loss would be not to give, and I would never not give as long as I work by the law. Or it would be to keep something for myself. So anything that would bring me loss, I can never encounter it. See, if I function correctly by the law, it is an impossibility to get below line zero. And so there will be no disease, and there will be no sadness, and there will be no grieving for the losses around me, because I will consider them all the loss of God and not my own loss. Now, we can, of course, have some kind of sorrow for God's loss, but it is not a sorrow that will make us inefficient and think around ourselves and go in circles around our own thoughts. And it is not a loss that will make me sick either. It will never bring me disease. So I can know for sure that if disease or inefficiency is appearing in my life, I must be outside of the law. And now I think this idea that I don't need anything from anyone, I only need to give them something, is a very difficult idea for the human being, because everyone wants to be loved, and some of us may be more conscious about that than others. I mean, I think all ladies really just have the dream to find a man that loves her in the right way, and the man has the same thing, but he's maybe he's less aware maybe of his need of love. And so the idea that I don't need that love is a very difficult idea. But this is when we have to understand, I think, that this longing or this feeling of the lack of love, or wanting to find love in another person, is coming from what I believe. You see, we saw that the spirit controls the whole body, and it makes our emotions as well. So when I have the wrong thought, I will also have the wrong emotion, because the emotions are just produced by the electricity in our body. And so in the beginning, we might not like the idea because it goes against our feelings. But this is when we must be conscious about what is reality and what is just coming out of the deception that I am God. Because if we want to live and we want to work efficiently, there is no other way to work except by the idea that nobody needs to love me. It's the only way to work efficiently. To trust that God gives everything I need, not for the sake of me keeping it to myself, but to pass it on to someone else, is the only way to live efficiently and also healthy by the law. Also, I like to remind myself that when I live on the side of deception, then others are in control of my thinking and my action. They're not responsible for them, but whatever they do, I will think accordingly. Yeah. I mean, when we are dependent on other people, then we will be distracted by what we believe they think and what they do and what they say. And especially inside your family, if one in the family is unhappy, then you are unhappy. If one in the family is happy, then you are happy. And you see it also with the patients. I have a great fear of angry patients. And sometimes, you have a treatment and you think you can do it well, and then in the end, it may not turn out as you were expecting, because the physical things are not always repairable, even though we try. And then I sometimes get the fear that maybe the patient will be angry with me, and how I will handle the anger of the patient. Yeah. To see, as soon as we believe that we are God and we give love from ourselves, or we work out of ourselves, then we have the risk that someone might not like what we give, and we believe then we can lose something, because we think we need the other one to like us, and we need the other one to accept us and be kind to us, and think that we are the best dentist in the world. And so sometimes God sends you a patient that doesn't really think you are the best dentist in the world, and who doesn't like you. And you have to then find out, about your heart and correct yourself, so that you don't stay in the same way of thinking. And it's a difficult process. But I like the idea that if I believe the truth, if I'm inside the law, then I am in control of my thoughts and actions. And so whatever the other one thinks or says or does, I cannot get out of my peace. I cannot tell you how much of a liberating thought it is that I should one day come to the place where people can do whatever they want to do, and I will be perfectly calm. I think this is a very, very encouraging thought, especially if you believe you will come to that place. And I hope I might come to the place where no matter what people do or say, I will not lose my peace. So let's look a little bit to how we fulfill our need of information. This is the spirit of man, and in the beginning we have his identity, and at the exit of the spirit we have our decisions. Now, at the entrance, of course, this is where the information comes in, but we need to know a few things also about the spirit. We must know that he functions as a channel, so he has an entrance and an exit, just like everything else in nature. But even though he functions as a channel, it is still a channel that is close to the outside. Now, this means that he has self-government and can only be controlled from the inside, never from the outside. So nothing can be put into him except that which he takes in. You cannot violate the spirit of man. You can violate the body, the physical body. You can strain him down, you can beat him up, you can forcefully feed him even. I mean, you can do it with animals as well, but you cannot forcefully feed the spirit of man. He works as a channel in the way that he takes things in and he passes on things in the other end at the exit, but he can never be violated. So he can be influenced by the information from outside only by actively taking it in. And then in terms of disease, I like to think about that the spirit is always active. He's never passive. There is never a time where you don't think. Even when you sleep, you're thinking and you're putting into place the things that you went through the day. Usually when you have dreams, you can dream of things that you've been thinking during the day. And so, as we've seen with the physical things, they are not always present when disease appears. You know, the sugar is not always present when the cavities appears, and the brushing may be just fine even though the cavities appears. But something that is always present, no matter what symptom you have, is your thinking. And so I think this is evidence that the only thing, if you look to all diseases, you will find that no matter the symptom, a thought is always present with the patient. And you will also find that a wrong thought is also present with the patient if you search for it. The patient may not be aware in the beginning, but if you dig deep and you ask about the relationships in his life, you will find a wrong thought somewhere there. At least this is until now my experience. There may be a few exceptions like Job, but I think for me, I don't look for the exceptions. I look for what I know to be the cause most times. And if there is no thought to find, then of course I cannot help the patient. He will have to stay with his disease or dig until he finds the cause himself in his thoughts, if it's just because he's not aware. But as long as you have a wrong thought, then I think disease can be dealt with, at least if God thinks it's best to bring the patient back to health. So as long as we believe the truth, as long as Adam was in the truth, he had the law as his measurement. He knew that he would work as a channel, that nothing was his, and he would take it in and pass it on. And the source of information is always outside of ourselves, and he then measured the information by the law as well to see if it fits the law. Now, connecting to God, as we saw before with the plug, was his trusting relationship to God, and this was all subconscious because the law had never been broken before, and he was just made to work like that. So he was not conscious about it. He had a subconscious trust in God, and he had faith in everything God said in the Word of God. He never questioned it until, of course, he deceived himself. And the result of this was the efficiency in the work that God gave him to do. Now, as he deceived himself and unplugged himself, then he replaced God, and now he does not use the measurement, but he takes himself as the measurement. And he doesn't trust the word of God, but he has doubting, and he trusts. Now, in Adam's case, for the first time, he was trusting in the words of his wife, or at least he mistrusted God and thought, "How bad can it be? It's just a bite of an apple." But this, of course, results in wrong beliefs and loss of self-control and disease and eternal loss. And we saw how Adam was the first case, I believe, of anxiety. He ran away from God because he feared the consequences of his distrust in God and of his actions. And maybe not even the deception, because he might not be aware of his deception at all. But he was fearing the consequence of his actions. So that's the loss of self-control and the conflict with his wife as well. Now, how to get out of this trouble is, of course, what we want to know. And I think this is usually we spend a lot of time on, or when I do the presentations, I spend a lot of time on the issue, because the issue is what we don't understand. We think we know that we're deceived, and but then in reality, we have no idea how deceived we are. So this is the part that needs a great study for us to understand. But of course, we must have a solution as well. And the solution has to be something reasonable, because of course we have the deception still. So it must be something that can be made conscious. So the human spirit is in two parts. We have a part in our consciousness that we are aware of, everything that is conscious to us. And then we have in the subconscious everything that we are not aware of. And we cannot do much about that which we are unaware of before it becomes conscious to us. So what we are conscious about is the body's reaction to when we have unfulfilled physical or spiritual needs. And we have the awareness about this, like when I don't have food for a while, the body reacts by a way that I feel hunger. Or if I haven't had something to drink for a while, I will feel thirsty. Now, with the spiritual needs, the result of lack of love is emotions and disease. And so we are, of course, aware, or many times we are aware if we are unhappy or if we are anxious, and we are aware if we have pain in our body as well. So this is where we have to see, oh, something is going on subconsciously. I may not know what's going on subconsciously, but I have now an awareness that something is going on and I have to find it out. And then what else is in our consciousness is our ability to observe and reason. So we can go to nature and we can see the law there, and we can reason about what we see, and we can learn from that and see what is possible and not possible. And we have also the ability to go to God and find out what is going on subconsciously. So subconsciously, we have our identity that I believe I am God. We are not aware of that. And then we have also the resulting thoughts that makes us believe that we have suffered loss. And all of these subconscious thoughts have to become conscious to us before we can remove them. Now, in our consciousness, we have also the measurement, so that when we go to search the thoughts, we can say, okay, when I go to God and say, Lord, something must be going on in my heart that I'm not aware of, because I have today the headaches, or I have stomach pain, or I have whatever it is, then I can then measure those thoughts when I find them and say, okay, is this a lawful thought? And then, of course, we have to know what it means that this is a lawful thought. It means, is this a thought where I know that I'm only a channel, that the other one cannot hurt me, or the other one cannot do anything to me because I'm not my own, I am a child of God? Is it a thought that makes me happy and peaceful? Because if the output of the thought is discomfort and unrest, then it cannot be a lawful thought, because the truth, if you work according to the law, you will always have peace. As long as you depend on God, you will never come out of your peace. And so this is the process that we have to go through. And I believe that if we go to God every day and we come to recognize the deception that lies underneath the thoughts that we are thinking, which are not lawful, and we dismiss those thoughts, we will also get back into peace. And it's not such an easy thing, because the emotions you may have from thinking the wrong thought can be very persuasive. They can be very strong. And so this is where I recently had a chat with a patient, and I was learning a lot about myself while I was talking to him, because we have a tendency of going into this issue, and then we go to the next issue and the next issue and the next issue, and then we explore the issue, and the issue just grows and grows and grows and grows. Now, this is where we have to realize, okay, I'm going in circles around myself. These thoughts are not making me better. They're not making me work well. And this is where I then need to say, okay, by law, I must be wrong. I may not be able to understand exactly what is right, but by law, this thought process cannot be true. It cannot be the truth. And so now I want to leave the thinking alone. I don't want to go into that way of thinking. I want to leave it alone. I do my task that I have to do throughout the day. And then when I'm able to explore the situation without running in circles around myself, I can go and check it out again. But we have to learn to put aside those things that makes us unrestful. So instead of digging up another problem and then digging up another problem and digging up another problem, this is when I leave it alone. I say, okay, it cannot be true. I may not be able to find out exactly now what to do or what the truth in the situation is, but at least I must be wrong here. And so I turn away from that way of thinking. And I come back to it later and say, okay, this is not true. Then what is the truth in the situation? And ask God to help me leave it alone, because going into the problem before you believe that it's there for your good and God is going to help you out and help you conquer it will just make you spin around yourself. And so I hope I will become more efficient in seeing that I am deceived right away and then not use a lot of time on that, but turning away from it and explore it when I can. But of course, in the end, the solution is to exchange our identity. We have to come from the idea that I am God and therefore needs everyone to like me and worship me. And the only way to do this, I think, is to realize that when the disease and the depression and the anxiety and the anger and the loneliness, conflict, addiction, substance abuse, and everything, when it turns up, it's God controlling the effect. So God controls the discomfort and the difficulty that I come into, and He does that to help me understand that I'm out of order and I'm outside the law. And now I have the chance to take the things to the cross, and little by little, not in one day, but little by little, I will have the new identity completely, and it will bring me physical and spiritual health. And so this is the fulfilling of the law in my life. If I work according to the truth, then I will know that worshiping God is to take love from Him. It's not to give Him something, because we cannot give anything to the one who owns everything. The only thing we can give Him is the broken heart and the sinful thoughts. You can say, Lord, take it, because it's not something I should carry around. So loving God with all my heart, my soul, and my strength means that I take everything from Him. I take love from Him. I take strength. I take power. I take everything I need to do. I take the resources from Him. And this is where I'm dependent. And in the other end, I do the job that God has given me, and I do it lovingly towards my neighbor. So I give Him love in the work that I'm doing for Him. And here I am independent, which means that I never need Him to do anything for me. I mean, He can maybe help me with some physical things. There's nothing wrong with that, but we should never need Him to do us a service when it comes to love. If He likes me, if He doesn't like me, if He behaves or if He misbehaves, the love of God is to show Him that whatever He does, however He behaves, I will love Him no matter what. And I think this is the goal of our lives in this time. And the only way I believe this is possible is if we recognize that whatever comes to us, it comes from God, and that God always has our best in interest. In this way, I can never get in trouble. The other day, I was getting into a fight with a patient, and it's never a good idea to get into a fight, but My temper is very short, and it does not take so much to get me out of peace. And sometimes my patience is just non-existent. And I think when I have explained things one time, the other one should agree with me and say, it's very wise, I will do as you say. And when they don't, I get very agitated. And I tried to reason a little bit while I was in the discussion. You have what you say to the patient and what comes out of you, and then subconsciously you have another, or not subconsciously, but in your mind you have another conversation going on with God, because I know I'm wrong. So I was talking to God while I was talking to the patient, and I said, if I could only believe that the reason why God sends me patients that will not just do what I say is that He wants to help me with my heart and it's all for my good. If I could only believe that, I would be perfectly happy in the situation. And I was battling myself because I thought I cannot fight with the patient, it's not good. But I'm very happy. Even my patients sometimes are more patient than me. Or at least they still, maybe because they know where the solution is, they come back still, because there is no other message that can help you out. So they have to come back until they understand it, or at least until they learn that God is the one that teaches them. And so I don't have any fear for the patient because I know the patient pretty well. But I want to come to the place where whoever comes across, whoever doesn't do what I want them to do, or say what I want them to say, or understand what I want them to understand, because sometimes you think you've explained everything to the best of your ability, and now because you put so much effort, he has to take it. Whatever they understand or what they take or not take, I want to keep my peace. And I believe it's possible if you believe that everything that comes to you, if it comes out of a person, if it comes out of the circumstances, whatever it is, if you believe that it comes from God and you have the firm understanding that God only wants your best and everything works for your salvation or for your salvation, or for the salvation of the other one, nobody can take away your peace, really. And so it's really simple, I think. It's not easy. It's not easy at all, because there's so much going on that we are not aware of. But it's really simple. I read recently in Steps to Christ, if we knew that God sees everything and that He guides everything and that nothing happens except out of His love, we would be perfectly fine. We would never have any issues in life. We would not fear the circumstances. We wouldn't fear the outside. We would not fear anything, and we would never be angry, or we would never be unpeaceful. Yeah. So I think this is the most simple message, but it's a difficult application only. And I think what we need to understand is that it cannot be fixed in a moment. It takes a lot of searching of the thoughts, because we may think that we have understood where the deception lies, but the deception is just so deep, and it goes a lot deeper than we understand. So in reality, the solution for the difficulties and the disease we have in our lives is a lot of time spent with God, searching our heart, finding out what it is that we're thinking that makes us miserable. Because whatever makes us miserable, if it's not taken care of, it's also going to make us sick. But if we go to God and we say, okay, Lord, I don't know this heart. I don't know how deep it goes. I don't know what kind of thinking is going on here, but help me find out what's going on. And we then find the thinking and we leave it alone, and I say, okay, I see how this thinking is destroying me. I don't want to think like this anymore. And we may not even be able to change the way we think right away, but then we go to God and we say, Lord, I know this cannot be the truth. I have a very difficult time believing the truth, but I want to believe. Now help my unbelief. And I believe if we keep at it, we will very fast become better. And then God might send us another challenge, and we will learn from that as well, and another challenge, and another challenge. And in the end, we will be rid of the sinful nature. But there is only one way, and it is this life of probation, which is full of symptoms and difficulties, because it must come out so that we can become aware of it. This is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Michaela, for such a practical way of showing us that reasoning in order to find our peace with God is going to lead us to victory and to healing, to health. So that was wonderful to see, and thank you for opening a little bit up to us your life and how you deal with these things, because it's very helpful, I have no doubt, for many present here today. So do you have what's the time? Maybe
Yeah, I mean,
5 minutes
we have to
for a
drive
couple
in
of
half an
questions?
hour, and
Okay.
yeah, so it's fine. I still have, we can maybe do 10 minutes still, or
Uh-huh.
15 minutes or something, and then I grab a little bit to eat, and
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So if there are any questions, please fire away now. I cannot see. If you can stop sharing the screen, maybe.
Oh, yes.
Thank
Is
you.
it better like this?
Yep, that's good.
Okay.
So any comments, any questions?
Yes. Thank you so much, Michaela, for this presentation. I was just reading here with this, the spirit of prophecy. Sister White says that we know that Satan is the originator of all disease, and it says sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation in the mind. So, like you say, if we have the wrong thoughts, or so that's where disease start, you know. And
Exactly.
and also when you say that, so if I have the right thought, I have the right connection and everything else, does that mean that you were talking about having a cavity in your teeth? Would that mean that I would not have any cavity? Because I've just learned that all your tooth, every tooth is connected to your organs. So
Exactly. Isn't it lovely? It's funny how the people don't think of the teeth as an organ of the body, and they think it's something separately, because I had this, talking with people before, and they're like, oh, also the teeth, as if they're an exception. Yeah, no. Yes, I mean, the blood supply and the nerve supply comes up in every tooth, right? And if the supply is not well, then I mean, then something must break. And I don't know, I mean, how the process exactly goes. But I see it so vividly in my patients. I mean, it's amazing. I have even people coming in with toothache, and you cannot even find, because usually we connect the symptom of toothache with a cavity. Yeah, it's a cavity that reaches to the nerve. But you can even have toothache, and you cannot see anything else physical except the pain that the patient is complaining about. So even toothache can come out of nowhere. And then people with, oh, maybe there's a crack in the tooth, or, like this, they will find any kind of excuse. But I've seen a young man come in with a canine, and surely he did not brush his teeth very good, but he had an abscess, a big, big abscess on his canine. There was no cavity, there was no gum disease. I mean, at least very superficially, and nothing that could explain the abscess, and which you only see normally the abscess connected with, cavities or something. But people don't look for those things that don't correlate with what they've learned in the books in school. And they also then if they find something that's different or outside, they find some kind of excuse to say, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, or something, you know, that, yeah, something coincidence or something like this. But yes, even the teeth are connected with what you're thinking. And I had just recently the first threat of a toothache. I've never had pain in my teeth. I had pain in my gums before, but I've never really had a toothache before. And I had maybe a couple of months ago, I had something that was threatening a little bit, and I thought, oh, I hope I don't get a toothache, because I've seen in the patients how painful it is, and I would like to avoid it. But if God gives me one day a toothache, I will take it and have to deal with it. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michaela, your presentation. And I'm a psychologist, but I'm quite new. Only I'm less than 2 years old.
okay, yeah.
I have found Jesus. And I'm
Yes.
learning so much. You know, when I did my psychology studies, I had no idea, but now my neurons are firing every day because of the connections. And then
Exactly.
majority of physical disease, 90% from our mind.
Yes, and
Praise
probably
God.
more than
And
90.
yeah, your presentation was excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, praise God. That's very good.
Anyone else has any comment or a question? This is your time. This is your chance. It looks like it's clear.
Excuse me.
Yes, go on.
Yes. Hi, Branka.
Hey, I just would like to ask if you could explain, like quickly, practically, how you do when you go to the cross and ask the Lord to
Yes.
remove the lie which you realize. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. So, how can I explain? I mean, I have maybe a good example is exactly the situation with where I have great fears of making mistakes, and I have right now a treatment that didn't go the way that I wanted it to do. And as I said, I'm not the most patient person on the planet. So I always like it that when I have a trouble that it goes away fast and it's solved very quickly so that I don't have to deal with it for too long, because the emotions of that, you know, that fearful thought that maybe the patient will be angry, or maybe I cannot save the truth, or things like that, you know, it puts you sometimes, at least with me, it puts me up in a corner. I cannot think, I cannot breathe, I cannot do anything. And so this is, of course, a situation where you have to go and you have to search out what is it that makes me so fearful. Now I found out it's the fear of the patient, and what, you know, is there then a solution? And I fear that it's my loss if I cannot fix the situation. And God is merciful, so a lot of times in my life, the issue when they have come up, these situations, because I've had this experience more than once, the fear that I couldn't solve an issue. And so he has shown me many times that he can correct, or he can change the effects in the way that he wants. And so he might change circumstances, or he may change the way things look. And so next time I look at the truth, oh, I have, you know, things have changed a little bit, and I can fix the things. So that's one way of his mercies. He just puts me through the period of fear to help me understand that I'm on the wrong path, but he still fixes the situations. And then mercifully, he has also made it last pretty shortly every time. But so this time it has lasted for months and months, because then the patient couldn't come to treatment. Then we had something, you know, because there's summer vacation, so we cannot do anything right now. And so he prolongs the situation and the circumstances little and little, so that my patient may grow, even though I think it's growing very slowly. And so I have good time to go and practice now. And so of course I went to God, and I tried to explore, where does the fear come from? Because in the beginning you might not even know where the fear comes from. It comes very quickly and comes immediately, and it can just take away your breath, and you have no idea where it comes from. Because when you get into a situation like that and the emotions are so strong, you cannot really search anything. You just, you know, you cannot think very well. But then after a while, it takes off, the symptoms wears off a little bit. And then they come up again and again and again in the period if you haven't solved the issue. So that you will not forget to go and solve the issue. But when I then have a pause from the symptoms of the anxiety, then you go to God and you say, okay, what kind of thinking is that's going on? And I digged out the idea that, or I was digging out the idea or finding the idea that I have the fear that it's my loss with the tooth, that maybe the patient will be angry, and I don't, I even have had the fear that the patient might complain to my boss or something like this, and when I then find those thoughts, I say, okay, I know by law that this kind of thinking is not correct. And then I go to God and say, Lord, I might not even be able to let this thinking go, but I want to let this thinking go. Will you help me? And you do that, and you do it over, and you do it over, and you do it again, and you do it again, until every time when the thought comes up, you say, oh, no, it's not correct, and you turn away from it, and you do something else. Now I'm very blessed to have a lot of things that I can do. I have, of course, my dentistry job, so I'm away during the day doing other things, and I have sometimes presentations to do, and I have a bit of counseling, online counseling as well through an online ministry. So I have things I can distract myself with. So I go and do my job, and whenever the thinking comes up that I might have a loss because of this situation with the patient, I say, Lord, I don't want to go into that kind of thinking, and I turn away from the thinking. Yeah. Because reality is that God has every effect in control, and if He allows the situation to develop in a way that the tooth cannot be saved, then I can know for sure that it must be gain. It looks like loss to me, but this is the tricky thing, that when you have a nature like ours, then you will see where there is gain, you will see loss, and when there is loss, you will see gain, because this is how sinful nature turns things upside down. But you go over the thought process and you say, okay, I know this way of thinking is not lawful, and you plead with God to help you leave it alone. And you do it until it works.
So how do you do the life exchange as well?
Well, it's just a matter of thinking. Everything is always only a matter of thinking, but the sinful nature will think that it's his loss if the truth cannot be saved.
Mm-hmm.
But the child of God will know that it's not his loss, because if the patient is happy with me or angry with me, it doesn't matter, because I don't take anything from the patient if I live inside the law. Yeah. So I recognize that I want to please the patient to be able to be loved, so that I can gain the love of the patient. But then I say, okay, Lord, I want to understand that as a child of God, I don't need the patient to like me. They can think of me what they want. Because we don't have to feel what I've really come to understand lately, and it's not, I'm no specialist at all in doing it, but it's really a small decision. You don't have to feel in a certain way to make the life exchange, and you don't have to feel a certain way when you've made the life exchange as well. All you have to do is agree with God that I would like not to believe I need anything from anyone anymore. I might not feel like that, but I want to become like that. And it's just a decision. There's nothing more than a decision to say, okay, I see that my heart believes I need something from the other one. This is my sinful nature. But I want to now live another life where I never need anything from the other one. Help me out. And that's all. You don't have to make it very sophisticated. You don't have to go through a great process of now I live the life of Christ and I don't live my own life or anything like this. You just have to understand the consequences of a life exchange. And the consequences of a life exchange is that now I go from needing the love of the other one to not needing it anymore. Yeah? So when we talk about the life exchange, we of course explain it in a way so that you can understand it by theory. But nothing really happens. I mean, of course, God changes the heart, and we cannot explain how that happens because He does that gradually as well. But in reality, what you experience might only be deciding to think in a different way. And that's it. And then eventually, as you start believing it as well, your emotions might change and you may be able to do what you want to do. But you don't have to do it with a certain kind of power or a certain kind of, I mean, you can even come and almost not believe it. And you go to God and say, Lord, I don't believe it, but I want to believe it. Help me out.
Mm.
And it's a very small thing. It doesn't cost a lot. It doesn't cost a lot of effort. It costs effort because we have to persevere, and it will come again and again. And it's discomfort when the deception is still there, because the fear comes up and the pain of the disease comes up, and all of this, to endure these symptoms and these uncontrolled behavior and not give up is the hard challenge, I think. But the decision of living another life is it's difficult, but it's just a small decision, and you just go and ask for the help to do it, and then you wait until it works, and you keep at it until it works.
Yeah. Can I just ask, you mentioned in the different disease, mental illness and depression. What happened to someone who doesn't have the power or doesn't have that the ability to make that exchange of their thoughts or their life for something better because they are so captured by the
Yeah.
depression? What
Well, I mean, there may be people that we cannot reach, but I would, or I know for sure that there will be people that we cannot reach. There are people that are so broken that it's impossible to help them anymore. I mean, if people have dementia, for example, the ability to reason has been destroyed, and if you are not able to reason, you cannot do anything anymore. Yeah, you know, I was working one time at an elder care center, and when I was talking about the flower sides out, she was talking about the socks or something completely. I mean, you could not have a decent conversation with the person. Yeah. But when this is said, I believe that we cannot know who has reason enough to take the message. And I mean, if you have to understand all of what I've said today in detail, it's wide and broad and deep, the truth of God, and we will be learning in all eternity. But understanding that I don't need to be loved by the other one, but I function by giving love, and your task is then to go to God and ask for that love to be able to love the other person. That's a very simple thing, and most people can handle that.
Mm.
So we can never say when a person is not able to do it, yeah, because they may not be able in the moment, but they may be able gradually. And people can have depression for many years and seem to be completely out of function, and then one day suddenly they get it and they get better. Yeah. So what happens to those that don't is really not in our control, and it's not our business. It's God's business how he saves and who he can save. But we can know for sure that anyone who takes the message and applies the message, and we should educate ourselves, of course, in explaining the things in the most simple way possible so that everyone have the greatest chance of taking it. But anyone who applies the principles will get better eventually.
Mm. Amen.
If not physically, at least spiritually, because this is the most important thing, because in reality, I mean, to become healthy is wonderful, but to become a child of God is all that matters.
Mm. Amen. Thank you.
But I think as long as people would like to understand, because, you know, you meet with all kinds of people, and sometimes because of your preconceived ideas, you might think, or I might think, oh, this person, you know, what can I do for them? But as long as they seek my counseling, as long as they seek my help to understand how to go to God for themselves, I should treat them as if I can help them. Because I have no idea. I mean, you can look to the Bible and see the demon-possessed men, and people thought you could do nothing with them. And suddenly there was a small thought in their mind, reaching out after God, reaching out after help, and they were saved. Yeah. So when a person is lost or not, if there's no reason and you cannot reason with the person, I would not, try and force it. But if they seek your help and they seek for the counseling and they seek for the understanding of themselves and of how to apply the principles, I would definitely take the call from God and try to help the patient understand. And the result of that is never my problem, because it's the responsibility of the patient. It's not my responsibility if they get well or not, but it's my responsibility always to be willing to help out when I can.
Mm.
And the result is in the hands of God.
Thank you very much. Shall we close with a quick
Yeah.
prayer? Would you like to say a prayer, Michaela?
Sure.
Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this wonderful message that you have given us. And I thank you for the way that you have blessed us very special and favored us to give us the opportunity to share this message with the world, a message that can help them become free of their fears and burdens in life. Lord, I pray that you will help us persevere in understanding ourselves and searching our hearts and applying the remedy that you have given, this unselfish idea that nothing comes from me, but that I should live from the love of God, not for my own sake, but for the sake of passing on the blessings that God has provided me with. Lord, I pray that you will help us get educated and help us learn how to make things as simple as possible, so that everyone may have the chance to take the message and pass it on to the people in their lives as well. And I pray also that you will be with us in our duties for the rest of the day and give us a blessed time with the people that we should be with. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Praise God, and thank you, Michaela, for accepting again to teach us.
thank you
Have
for
a
having me.
blessed Sabbath and a happy Sabbath, and yeah, God be with you.
God bless
Yes.
you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.
God
Thank
bless.
you,
Thank
Michaela.
you.
God bless.
God
Thank you.
bless.
Bye.
Okay.
See you.
Bye bye.
Go well, everybody.
God